Chapter 8. At 5 o'clock the two ladies retired to dress, and at 6:30 Elizabeth was summoned to dinner. To the civil inquiries which then poured in, and among which she had the pleasure of distinguishing the much superior solicitude of Mr. Bingley's, she could not make a very favourable answer. Jane was by no means better. The sisters, on hearing this, repeated 3 or 4 times how much they were grieved, how shocking it was to have a bad cold, and how excessively they disliked being ill themselves, and then thought no more of the matter. Their indifference towards Jane, when not immediately before them, restored Elizabeth to the enjoyment of all her former dislike. Their brother, indeed, was the only one of the party whom she could regard with any complacency, and he was evidently most attentive to her. Mr. Darcy said very little, and Mr. Hurst nothing at all. The former was divided between admiration of the brilliancy which exercise had given to her complexion and doubt as to the occasions justifying her coming so far alone. The latter was thinking only of his breakfast. Her inquiries after her sister were not very favourably answered. Miss Bennet had slept ill, and though up, was very feverish, and not well enough to leave her room. Elizabeth was glad to be dismissed from dining alone with the family, and to go back to Jane, whom she found even worse than she had expected. After sitting with her some time, Miss Bingley came and sat with them, as long as her visit was marked by the expressions of concern and compassion that had already reached her through a servant. After a short silence, Miss Bingley began with, "I am afraid, Mr. Darcy," observed Miss Bingley, "that this adventure has rather affected your admiration of her fine eyes." "Not at all," he replied. "They were brightened by the exercise." A short pause followed this speech, and Mrs. Hurst began again. "I have an excessive regard for Miss Jane Bennet. She is really a very sweet girl, and I wish with all my heart she were well settled. But with such a father and mother, and such low connections, I am afraid there is no chance of it. I think I have heard you say that their uncle is an attorney in Meryton." "Yes, and they have another, who lives somewhere near Cheapside." "That is capital," added her sister, and they both laughed heartily. "If they had uncles enough to fill all Cheapside," cried Bingley, "it would not make them one jot less agreeable." "But it must very materially lessen their chance of marrying men of any consideration in the world," replied Darcy. To this speech Bingley made no answer, but his sisters gave it their hearty assent, and indulged their mirth for some time at the expense of their dear friend's vulgar relations. With a renewal of tenderness, however, they returned to Jane, whom they really loved, and whose society they had longed to enjoy again. After some polite expressions of concern, they begged Elizabeth to send their best compliments to her sister, and to say how much they wished for her speedy recovery. Elizabeth, however, had scarce left the room when Miss Bingley began again to congratulate herself on Jane's being so easily kept at Netherfield. "She is a charming creature, and I shall be so glad to have her here," she said. "She is certainly a sweet girl," said Mrs. Hurst, "and I wish she were better. But it is rather a disagreeable thing that she should be ill here." Elizabeth passed the chief of the night in her sister's room, and in the morning had the pleasure of being able to send a tolerable answer to the inquiries which she very early received from Mr. Bingley by a housemaid, and some time afterwards from the 2 elegant ladies who waited on his sisters. Jane was not better. The sisters expressed the deepest concern. Miss Bingley was quite distressed, and promised to sit with her all the morning. Elizabeth was glad to observe that she had not the power to deceive her friend. After breakfast, Elizabeth remained with Jane in quietness, and saw no one but the apothecary. Jane's recovery was still slow, and her care and presence still necessary.
If you enjoyed Chapter 8, subscribe now for Chapter 9 and the rest of this amazing story. You can also find the full playlist here to improve your English with ease. Don't miss out.